Wait, what does this go like again? Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Key state alert!
Here we are with a key state alert.
Over to Nathan.
Hello and welcome to a new Nation podcast. We're here on the cusp of an election announcement, but we couldn't wait any longer to talk about the US election. We're back with Nick Warden, our US election correspondent all the way from Scranton. It's the wonderful Olly Parker.
Hi. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah.
Whew. Has anyone slept?
No.
I have. I managed to stay up till 2. I managed to stay up to 2 a.m. and then I was asleep. I couldn't manage it anymore.
You're
but
such an old man.
I know, but I've had 3 days, like everyone else, of total tension. Haven't been able to turn off CNN. Now obsessed with like their interactive wall of magic. Now obsessed with Quest Means Business, which is my new favorite thing.
Future of mice.
I know. So I just think, it's been such an exciting election and incredibly tense, I think, for everyone, both because we still don't know the result, which is incredible, but also I think partly because how the electoral system has played out in America, where with the late counting of postal votes, and we know they're heavily into Democrats, keeping that tension level really, really high. For me, the most disappointing thing was that every time I kept going to sleep, I kept expecting to wake up after 8 hours and to know the result. And like 3 nights in a row, that has not been the case.
And Nevada still haven't counted any more votes.
Yeah,
we have now.
Oh, good.
We are recording this podcast at 6:45 on the 6th, Friday the 6th of November. So if you've been watching I've been watching Fox News's website.
Oh.
They called Arizona first, and I thought Fox News are calling Arizona, then I want to keep watching them.
See, now I'm all with CNN. I'm like, be conservative, although I'm starting to lose my patience a little bit now with this growing margin in favor of Biden in Pennsylvania. But before we dig into that, Olly, do you want to give us an overview of where we stand? What's the situation now? For listeners who have somehow managed to completely ignore that this is happening and have come from some sort of twilight world.
Sure. So, you say we don't know who's won. We don't know who's officially won, but it's clearly Biden. So we have a few outstanding states. We have quite a few outstanding states actually, but we have a few outstanding states, 4 that are still competitive. So we have Nevada, where Biden is, at time of recording, 20,000 plus votes ahead, but most of his outstanding vote is in Clark County, which is heavily Democratic. That's the area around Las Vegas. So he'll win that. We've then got Arizona next door. He's clearly ahead there. Bit too close to call. We don't know if he's going to win it, but Biden doesn't need it. We've then got Georgia. Biden's also ahead. That's even closer than Arizona. I would say that's definitely too close to call. There's up to 9,000 military ballots outstanding. They tend to turn Republican. He's only ahead by 1,200 or so. There's also provisional ballots. No idea how many there are of those or how they'll trend. Some say Democratic, but we don't know. So that's genuinely too close to call. But again, Biden doesn't need it. And then we have the final, where I am right now, Pennsylvania, where I think 20,000 and growing is the Biden lead. The outstanding ballots that have been coming in over the past, 2 days of postal ballots have been like 80% Biden. There's absolutely no reason why that won't continue. We know here that the provisional ballots that haven't been counted yet are heavily Democratic. We also know that Biden has won without post-election day votes. So these are votes that haven't been received yet, but will be postmarked election day. He doesn't need those to win, even though they're probably heavily Democratic as well, which cuts off one of Trump's like challenge options, as it were. So he's ahead there. He's going to win there. He's going to be the next president of the United States. Kamala Harris is going to be the next vice president.
There's so many exciting things to touch on there, but just to round off the picture, in order for if Joe Biden is declared the winner in Pennsylvania, he becomes the next president of the United States. If he wins Georgia, there's no way for Donald Trump to become the next president of the United States. So then he also becomes the president of the United States. He doesn't need to even worry about Arizona and Nevada anymore. But
if Georgia, he'd need Nevada as well, which he will.
Oh, would he?
Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. So there are a number of routes
I
still
feel like
remaining.
John King, sort of.
Yeah. You can you start to draw the numbers for me as well? Do the math.
I
But
have a notepad, which
yeah, but what that means, though, in a nutshell, like you said, is that ultimately there are a number of routes for Joe Biden to become president of the United States. The most likely one being that he wins Pennsylvania. There is now almost no routes left for Donald Trump to become president again.
is one remaining route is the legitimate route, but even that is closing.
Yeah, the illegitimate route.
Yeah,
which would be a series of challenges to the legality.
Challenges to cast aspersions on the result, eventually hoping that makes its way through lower court circuits, all the way up to the Supreme Court, and then try and steal the election.
But they've got no evidence, right? This is what we keep hearing all day, that they're making these assertions that it's been stolen. They're making these assertions that, the election hasn't been done very well, but there seems to be no any evidence whatsoever that it has. I think we were talking about the one thing that they had was that in some place they'd found this woman who said that her vote had been stolen, and they sort of put her forward. And then when they looked at the signature on her vote, they were like, no, that's your signature. You signed that. And she went, oh, yeah. Oh, I got so your vote wasn't stolen.
Yeah.
What's been interesting is the scattergun approach of Trump's response. And lots of people will be watching the CNN coverage. Everyone is talking about what happened between Gore versus Bush in 2000 when there was a challenge. That challenge was in one state, over 500 votes. And now what we've got is, an increasing number of legal challenges over tens or thousands of votes. Like, he surely doesn't have a hope in hell of winning any of these legal challenges and stealing the presidency.
Well, even if he does, like, you might win the legal challenge, but none of them are at the scale of fraud or the inconsistency that he's arguing for that would change the results of the election, right?
Mm-hmm. I think scattergun approach is right. I think it's an attempt to try and cast doubt by mentioning as many things as you can possibly can in the hope that just about enough sticks that you can cast just about enough doubt to undermine it in people's minds. And let's have no doubt that it is probably working with some people. America is a very divided country. There's a lot of people who are clearly Trump fanatics who came out for him at this election, but did not come out for the Republicans in 2018. So, there's clearly a constituency there that's listening to this. And if you're an American, that's quite dangerous, and you're probably a bit worried about that, to be honest. But, let's not confuse that with there being any doubt that any of this is factual. So, for example, one court case that I think got upheld for a while wasn't about letting observers into the count. It was about how close they could stand while the count was in progress. So the rule said 12 feet and the Republicans wanted 6 feet. Now, and that was one of the things that Trump used in his press conference. So, when you're kind of at that level, and eventually they did just let them stand 6 feet away. But when you're at that level of trying to cast dispersion, scattergun is your only tactic. And I have to say, this, just touching on Trump's press conference, he looked like a broken man. He wasn't selling it with any pizzazz. He certainly wasn't kind of pushing it, was he?
Well, there's two things about Trump's presentation recently. The first thing on that press conference was that we often assume when he comes out with these sort of angry jibes that they're off the cuff and he's, just talking as he goes, and that's why they're always so outrageous and ridiculous. And what we actually saw in that press conference that they were pre-written. So that actually they were written down as a deliberate strategy to, I think, confuse and obfuscate the result. The second thing is that Donald Trump hasn't tweeted for quite some time now, I believe. So, what you're seeing more and more, it feels a bit like the wonderful simile that was put forward by CNN, which was, the obese turtle on its back in the sun writhing about. And one, beautiful language, but two, also, you can feel this desperation really starting to eke out from the campaign. And if you actually look at Eric, his son, Donald Trump Jr.'s,
both of them,
tweets, they're hysterical, as in they have lost the plot, and they are, there's one that I saw that I thought was coming close to sedition. It was almost encouraging armed resistance against the Democratic vote. And it's
we saw Steve Bannon banned from Twitter now for his beheading.
I was going to touch on that actually. I mean, you know, I've heard about these sort of Trump and Trump Jr. tweets, but I actually haven't seen them because Twitter took them down pretty immediately. Donald Trump's Twitter feed is just currently a stream of things saying this is misinformation, so we're not letting it through.
And
Which has interesting implications for future elections.
And he's commented on that by tweeting, Twitter is out of control, made possible through the government gift of Section 230. An hour ago, he tweeted, where are the missing military ballots in Georgia? What happened to them?
But they're coming.
It doesn't...
This comes down to the inconsistencies of the Trump argument right now. What completely undermined him was what happened in Arizona and to an extent what's happening in Georgia as well. So the plan was clearly, win the table and then we can cast aspersions on the Rust Belt, plus Pennsylvania, because similar states, similar region of the country, a similar pattern was going to happen whereby they were going to count the election vote first and then the mail vote was going to come in and be like 80% Democratic. So they could just point at that. It's a clear strategy. Whereas Arizona, where he's behind, forced Donald Trump to say, stop the count. Apart from there, which is a really easy consistency to point out. And plus also saying, these are, Democratic states, Democratic establishments sending me up in the Rust Belt. And actually, Georgia, Republican governor, election run by Republicans. They were very robust as Republicans saying, no, the vote here is fair. So, it's really, those two states swinging away from him has really just undermined him.
It was very interesting. Just this now, actually, on CNN, they were getting reports of some of the atmosphere within the West Wing itself, and apparently those reports were saying that Donald was angry and watching lots of television and furious that he felt that his supporters in the Republican Party weren't coming out to bat for him and argue for his side, but also that his chief of staff was sort of continuing to encourage the sort of conspiracy theory aspect, which other members in the West Wing were starting to consider quite dangerous in terms of sort of a smooth transition of power. And then, of course, as you can imagine, it's a little bit like rats in a sinking ship. Everyone suddenly went, oh God, I'm not going to have a job. So, everyone is now starting to think about themselves and having a bit of a panic. It must be a really intense, stressful atmosphere there. And I suppose what worries me about that is that we know that under pressure, Donald Trump doesn't respond well. We know that at the best of times he isn't logical, but he's probably had very little sleep. He sees his power ebbing away. And it's scary. It's scary because the smooth transition of power in a democracy is a fragile, delicate thing. And, I don't think the Biden camp helped themselves when they released a statement that said, the US government is well used to removing loiterers or unwelcome guests from the White House. That to me was a potentially an unnecessary escalation too early. I think they've done such a good job so far of being presidential, of looking like the mature governing party ready to take over. I always be like, don't ruin it, don't spoil it, keep doing that. And of course, we have an address to the nation, is what they're calling it, even though I'm not sure if they're allowed to do that yet. They've got an address to the nation happening this evening.
All of his statements have been addresses to the nation, and that's they've been pitching that as him being presidential. And actually, I think Joe Biden has looked more presidential over the last 48 hours than he did throughout the whole campaign. He actually has taken on the role of president-elect already, and I think that his two addresses to the nation were almost pitch perfect. In terms of count every vote. And that was really important, not claiming victory and certainly not coming out and tweeting about how he was claiming the electoral college votes first.
Oh, that was mad. It was like the kind of thing that people put on your Facebook that are like friends with your parents, of like, I formally notify Facebook that they cannot copy any of my posts about my favorite hairdresser and use it against me. It's that kind of like full legal language ridiculousness, and you're like, you are the leader for now of the free world, mate. You need to get a grip. On that, if Biden is going to be successful, and I think it's looking increasingly like he will, thank goodness, I think we need to start thinking a little bit about what that means in terms of transition, because Ollie, unlike in the United Kingdom, there's 3 months of Donald Trump still being in power. What might that look like in reality for, can he still pass legislation? Can he still, get things done? Or how does it work?
I'll pull those apart. What do I think will happen and how does it work? I'll start with how does it work. So can he pass legislation? I mean, he's not been able to pass legislation for the last 2 years because he lost the House of Representatives in the 2018 midterms. And so nothing, Pelosi will not let him pass anything, say, besides a coronavirus relief bill, maybe. But, Trump wouldn't get much say in that. That would be Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, who will remain.
Who has been very silent.
He's been extremely silent. And Pelosi kind of putting that together and sending it to Donald Trump and asking him whether he wants to sign it or not. Like his power in that sphere will be very minimal. And that's a stretch as well. That's me just saying the only thing that could happen. In terms of, how it will look, I think I would actually go back to what we were saying in the last podcast about what kind of the end game is for Trump when he loses. So we've had this scattergun approach of trying to undermine confidence in what's happening. I think that will continue, but clearly he's got no evidence and he's got nothing to base it on, but also clearly he has convinced some of his most partisan supporters. So I would lean towards some kind of media network being set up off the back of this. Some kind of like, Trump TV Truth Network.
And he was slagging off Fox News. He was saying Fox News isn't what it used to be. You can't trust you guys anymore. That was his opening gambit on election day.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
I mean, who had Rupert Murdoch being the good guy of 2020? With Trump's phoning him up, with Trump's chief of staff phoning him up, telling him to, recuse the Arizona call because they knew how harmful that was to the Trump narrative. And Rupert Murdoch standing by his TV station, standing by his journalists and refusing to do it. I mean, 2020 has given us a lot of surprises, but Rupert Murdoch being cheered to the rafters.
The hero.
was certainly not one on my bingo card.
It was funny watching the Arizona Republican Party come out and boo Fox Network.
Yeah.
It seems to be the last 4 years Fox News has been the only news outlet that Trump relied on and spoke well of. And everyone else was in the fake news media, and now Fox News have been encompassed in that.
Well, we said last time, didn't we, that Fox had signed up with the other major networks strict code of how they were going to approach election night, and it seems to have held, and that's angered Trump.
Yeah. Sorry, I had anything after you.
No, I was just going to say. So, what's next? I'm looking at what's happening live, so that we can keep up with anything. If
what's happening live?
Any other live updates? We've only got now that sources close to the White House are saying officials are beginning to back away from Trump. They're obviously thinking about their future careers, which I think is probably quite wise. But what is next? What's going to happen over the next couple of days? Because it feels like a bit of a bull in a china shop approach that we've got here from Trump. That this could still go on for some weeks before we actually know for definite what's going to happen.
Yeah, like will Biden claim victory tonight? Like, is that what's going to happen? Because if not, then what happens?
I think Biden will clearly stay the course. I think what you said about his approach around being presidential, short, clear comms, straight to camera, backed by, those PowerPoint slides they were putting out. It will be like that. They'll continue that strategy. I think tonight will be, I don't think he'll claim victory unless the networks call it for him between now and his address, which, they might. There's some pressure now to start calling Pennsylvania and Nevada, which would put him over the top. Pennsylvania alone would put him over the top. So there is some pressure there. So I think, I lost my train of thought a bit. What do I think? I think he'll continue the strategy. I think he'll want a short piece to camera. I think he'll want to look right down. He'll want to keep it clear. And I think it might be a bit of, for the last couple of nights, I've been telling you that we're really confident that we're going to pull ahead in these states. You can now see we've pulled ahead. It's only a matter of time. Keep calm. This will get resolved.
In going to Nathan's point then, so he goes and does this address. And then what happens? So what happens next?
We're waiting for the states to be called. And I mean,
by the networks.
Yeah, by the networks or by state election officials. I don't think we're going to get a call in Georgia anytime soon. I just think it's too tight. However, our other 3 states are in play. I think we could get a call. As I say, Nevada, there's increasing pressure because of the composition of the vote that's left. Philadelphia, increasing pressure for exactly the same reason. And Arizona, the last couple of ballot drops, Trump has fallen below the thresholds he needs to pull that state back. I'm not saying it's over, but I'm just saying it's tilting away from him. And plus, of course, you know, Fox, as we mentioned earlier, has actually already called the state for Joe Biden. So in a weird way, on some networks, if Nevada gets called, Fox would actually say he's the next president, for example. So, you know, I think we're just waiting for one of those big calls to land, really, and then it's done. That could happen tomorrow morning, maybe Monday, but no further than that.
I am so excited that the clouds are parting and something nice is happening. Like it's been a difficult 4 years and it's been a difficult 2020, and this would be an excellent gift at the end of a year. But I think what we also need to talk about, probably not today, but probably next time we come back, which will be after the election is called, is I'd love for us to have both a little bit of a chat about what Biden's priorities might be and what he might be doing in those first year, like in government. I think would be really interesting. Obviously, he's going to have, I think it's something like 1,400 positions to fill because of the way the American system works. So that's going to be interesting as well. Will we see jobs for Elizabeth Warren? Will we see jobs for Pete Buttigieg? You know, what might this look like? But then I'd also love to talk a little bit, and we'd love to have you on for this, Olly, if you feel like you would be interested in this as well, a little bit about sort of the age of the strong man. You know, I don't think we can say that it's over because, as you've pointed out, you know, 70 million people have voted for Donald Trump and there's still strong men in different countries around the world. But I think hopefully, well, we don't know how this will completely turn out, this shows us that these people can be challenged and they can be defeated if you have a strong democratic system. And I think it'd be really good for us to dig into that a little bit and talk about sort of there. Because like you said, you know, he still won a lot of votes, but then I would also put back that theoretically, Joe Biden has both won, fingers crossed, as many electoral college votes as Donald Trump won, and has won the popular vote by over 4 million votes. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see the tone that him and his administration takes, because he could legitimately say, just like Donald Trump did, well, actually, I've got a landslide and I've got a mandate to do some things, but we'll have to wait and see. So
I think it's really interesting. I think the future of the Democratic and Republican parties are really, really interesting. And I think some of those kind of proxy wars have started to flow into the UK political discourse, actually. And I think it's a really interesting thing to dig into. And I think actually we shouldn't get too blindsided by just looking at the future of the Democrats. I think the kind of progressive left across the world does this far too much. What does this mean for Democrats? What does this mean for Biden? How should he approach this to government? The Republicans have a lot of really serious issues to tackle as well about how their party and how their coalition is going to kind of come back together coming forward. And I think, you know, your point about the popular vote, I think in US presidential elections, the Republicans have won the popular vote once in the last, since 1992 now. So wow. You know, that's a generation where they haven't managed to win the popular vote in a presidential year. That's huge. You know, we should give some time to that as well.
Yeah, and I'd also love to explore some of the issues around what happened in Miami-Dade, and looking at what's going on with the Latino vote there, because I think when people do a sort of takeout and look at American politics, people often said, well, inevitably everything's going to go Democratic because of the rising Latino vote. And I just think there's lots of interesting parallels with how that's both not correct, doesn't understand values, but also if you look at what's happening to the ethnic minority and black vote in the UK in particular, which used to be very strongly Labour and actually is now not, I think there's interesting parallels to look at there as well about how the left can sometimes take for granted minority votes when it shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. A lot of really interesting chat. I think there's a lot of interesting things to say about polling as well.
That is the geekiest thing.
It's true, you know, because that is in between elections. That's how we measure the horse race. And actually, if we are measuring it against like metrics that are wildly off, like, you know, it's something that needs to be dug into. I mean, the whole narrative. I mean, if the polls were correct going into this election, we'd have been saying nail biter throughout. Instead, we went into this election thinking, oh, chance for Biden landslide. Didn't come anywhere near that. So, you know, the Republicans still control the Senate. No one said that was going to happen. So.
Now, I'm just glancing at the predictions that you made, Olly, and I don't think we should go through them today. I think we should wait till the final results are there. But I think you've been pretty accurate.
I thought he would win one kind of southern Sunbelt state, but I got the Sunbelt state wrong. If Biden hangs on in Georgia.
Well,
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Currently on CNN, we're sitting at 253 electoral votes for Biden, 213 for Trump.
It's been that way for forever, though, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Like days. We've been on 253 for
And
days.
why have they not called Alaska yet? Like, just call it. Come on.
Just call Pennsylvania. Like, this is what's bugging me. It's so obvious where the trend is going. It's
an independent senator who is running. He will caucus with the Democrats, but he's officially an independent. Has actually said that he thinks he has a chance of winning.
In Alaska. But
how
surely
true that is, I don't know. But like
surely every independent says that.
Based on the count, he basically said the same thing that Biden's been saying. Once all the vote is in, I think you'll see that I'm ahead. He basically copied that line. So
Great.
Who knows? Who knows? I've been wondering the same thing, and then I saw that, and I thought, well, that is interesting.
North Carolina also has not been called yet, but looks
It's very Trumpian, though.
very confident for Trump.
I think they're pretty confident. I think they're only waiting for like provisional ballots and overseas ballots to come in, and there's a deadline on that.
What is, just one final sort of like geek question. I've not quite understood what a provisional ballot is.
We get them in the UK.
Yeah. But it means slightly different things in different counties, different states, because of what we've been saying about the American system before. But broadly, what it means that if you turn up on election day and you forgot your ID or you went to the wrong polling station, they'll let you fill out a vote, and then you can come back later and provide the ID or resolve an address issue or something.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, we get them in the UK. If your name's not on the list, you're still allowed the chance to vote, and they'll work out if you were definitely meant to be on the list, and that you've not voted somewhere else. There's usually a bit of that cross contamination of checking.
Cool.
But he this with mail-in votes, as if Trump's been saying, like, as if mail-in votes have never happened before. They happen now all the time. They're a common election.
A postal vote? What? A vote for the post is outrageous.
I know.
He was saying, there was one state where they had to copy all the ballots because they printed them on the wrong size of paper. The election team were making sure that every ballot was crossed off against each other, and even just that. The Democrats were copying ballots in such and such state allows for that narrative to be built. I'm sure we'll continue to see more of this.
They even have their own hashtag use pen conspiracy, which is some votes were filled out using Sharpie pens. Apparently, it was difficult to read them in the electronic scanners they have.
But they don't realise that if it's not scanned, it's still counted and looked at by both the Democrats and Republicans.
All about undermining confidence.
This would also be a very interesting conversation at some point about machines in elections and how, you can't hack a community centre in Hackney. So, like, you can't hack the Sobel Centre in Islington. You can't hack down the road in Edinburgh.
But what was interesting was, I think it was Georgia that said that this is the first election in 20 years that they've not used electric voting systems in counting in polling stations. So it sounds to me like, there was already thoughts that Trump might say that there was illegitimacy in the election, and they've tried to counteract that by securing a paper-based system in some of the states that have now come on to be quite important in this race.
Definitely.
I can actually explain why states decided to move towards electronic counting. And
go on then, do it quickly. Give us that. That's a lovely thing to end on.
Very, very, very nerdy. But basically, do you remember, I think it was a UK European election where there's some regions where there was an extremely long ballot paper. And a few people complaining about it, saying it's far too long, it's going to take forever to count, blah, 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 blah. But essentially, in every US election, on the same day as you'll be voting for president, you'll also be voting for your senator, your maybe your House member, also your local state senator, your local House representatives, councilmen, mayors, vice mayors, statewide ballot provisions, county-wide ballot provisions, council ballot provisions. So you can end up, I think in Nevada, they said that their ballot paper was 2 pages long, for example. So you can end up with hugely long ballot papers. So the way you speed it up is by making it electronic, so people can just do it really quickly. And then, of course, you can then tally the votes really, really quickly. So that's why they do it. And Florida's really good at it, which is why they were so quick. So that's why they do it.
Well, maybe Nevada can learn, because
Nevada needs to learn.
we have been waiting far too long for them to announce.
Nothing
That guy
moves.
comes on night after night, doesn't he? And says, it's not my job to be quick, it's my job to be accurate. And I just take as long as I need.
Can he not do both? Like, I feel like it's not one or the other. Can you not be both reasonable and accurate? Like, okay, shall we call it there then, chaps? And we'll come back together after we know who the next president for sure is, and we'll have a little bit chat about some of those issues. Maybe we'll even talk about some non-American news. What is there such a thing? You know, we've had furlough scheme, and we've had all sorts of things happen.
We've had the SNP results in Edinburgh Central, one of the seats that we've been looking at, and
as equally important as the UK furlough scheme extension, equally, and the US presidential race.
But I'm sure we'll get back to normal service on New Nation very soon. But you know, the American election is one of the biggest deals in the world, so it's absolutely right that we take an interest. Hopefully, our listeners have too, but probably got more sleep than me or Olly have in the last couple of days. We're not all a part-timer like you, Nick.
No,
it's called being a grown-up. Who goes to bed at a reasonable time. Can I say, staying up till 2 a.m. is not being a part-timer. It's like, anyway, it's fine. I don't have to justify myself to you or anyone else.
On that note, thanks very much for joining us again, Olly. We look forward to hearing your thoughts on the final result, and we'll see everyone. Well, you will hear us all very soon.